Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We wanted, before we have an opportunity to give some concluding remarks on the session that we had today, to offer an update on some of the latest efforts, in particular in the Atlantic region, on the situation involving asylum seekers who have crossed irregularly into Canada. La situation au chemin de Roxham, ce n'est pas juste un défi pour le Québec, c'est une responsabilité canadienne. Je veux remercier mes collègues de la région Atlantique, Ontario et Québec aussi, pour continuer de soutenir des personnes qui sont plus vulnérables. C'est très important de continuer d'avoir l'empathie pour les personnes qui arrivent ici. And I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you sincerely. Let me tell you, folks, when we made phone calls a number of weeks ago to say that the uptick in the number of people who have crossed irregularly demanded us to continue to work with communities outside of Quebec. The folks that you see standing next to me in Atlantic Canada, regardless of party or level of government, responded by saying, how can we help? To see the effort from the region of the country that I come from in Atlantic Canada to continue to treat vulnerable people with respect as we seek to contribute national solutions to national challenges is something that gives me great hope for the relationship that we've built. Just to provide people with a snapshot of the current lay of the land. In the short term, of course, we're going to continue to work with communities that have seen significant numbers of people arrive by providing the supports that are eligible through federal programs. And we're going to continue to work with communities who've demonstrated that they do have the capacity to support more people who arrive who may be vulnerable, that are in search of safe haven. At the same time, we've started to create an inventory of skills, and a huge credit in particular to New Brunswick. So far, 100% of the asylum seekers who've landed in New Brunswick have completed the skills inventory questionnaire to signal what talents they have to contribute to the local economy. In the medium term, of course, we're going to continue to work with our partners in the United States. I came back just a few days ago from a meeting with my counterpart, the Secretary for Homeland Security in Washington, D.C., to continue to advance our conversations on the management of the Canada-U.S. border. And in the long term, of course, we can't forget that irregular migration is a challenge of global proportion. And addressing the root cause of irregular migration demands us to build capacity in the countries of origin for many asylum seekers, but it also requires that we continue to expand regular pathways to come to Canada within the programs that are designed by the Government of Canada. But today, I really wanted to bring the focus to my Atlantic Canadian counterparts, as well as those in Ontario who've stepped up to help and realize that this is not just a challenge for Quebec. So thank you, and perhaps we'll begin with Minister Dunn to offer some perspective on the New Brunswick experience to date.
Thank you very much, Minister Fraser. It's actually a great opportunity for the province of New Brunswick to be able to raise our hand and say that we're here to help. When Minister Fraser called me and said, is this something that would be of interest to you? I said, absolutely, certainly it is of interest. I think that's one of the reasons why we have a global reputation as people who care about others. And in these examples, we can actually allow the world to see that that's, we walk the walk. So we don't just talk about it, we actually do it. So I can say for the province of New Brunswick right now, we've actually received 57 asylum seekers. And to Minister Fraser's point, we were there with the multicultural associations on the ground, speaking with them, understanding their circumstances, understanding where they were coming from, getting a better understanding of their skill sets, of their language capabilities. And really our priority is to make sure that we assist them in getting employment and settling into our communities and helping them thrive. So I appreciate the opportunity, Minister Fraser. Thank you very much for counting New Brunswick in and giving us that opportunity. Thank you.
Of course, and I'll step aside and yield the floor to Minister Byrne from Newfoundland as well.
Thank you, Minister Fraser. Sean, the people of Newfoundland and Labrador and its government stand ready to assist in what is an evolving situation, a very fluid situation, but is clearly a national situation that demands a national solution. Newfoundland and Labrador will be part of that solution. We will put our back into an effort to support those who are most vulnerable. This is unique and novel territory for many of us, but it is not unique and novel for those who have thrown their weight into the support for people who need our assistance. Canada comes with a particular pledge towards its citizenship. To be a citizen, you have to recognize the responsibilities of your citizenship and the privilege that we hold as Canadians. We need to share that privilege. And therefore, the government of Newfoundland and Labrador will stand with the federal government and with our partners, with our colleagues in the Atlantic provinces and elsewhere, supporting those who need our support. We anticipate in the coming days there will be asylum seekers. We are working in partnership with the federal government of Canada, with IRCC, to receive asylum seekers in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. And I can assure you, when they arrive and after they arrived, they will be welcomed, they will be supported, and we will tend to their needs and look forward to the day they contribute to our needs. We seek their resettlement, successful resettlement into Newfoundland and Labrador, and to become active members of our community. We will determine that through the course of the proceedings that have to take place in the days, weeks, and months ahead. But we will be engaged with supporting them while the asylum process is completed. And in that meantime, we will be there for them. So I'm very, very pleased to stand tall and say, on behalf of the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, as a member of the Federation of the Canadian people, we stand with these asylum seekers.
And finally, my friend and colleague, Minister Balser, from representing the provincial government of Nova Scotia, to offer a few thoughts.
Well, thank you very much, Minister. And it's such a privilege to be able to stand next to you, of course, as a fellow Nova Scotian and also a fellow rural Nova Scotian. But our response, of course, similar to New Brunswick, similar to our Atlantic colleagues, Newfoundland and Labrador, was no different. We put our hand up and said, we're here to help. We have done that time and time again as a province in any terms when the federal government has said, we have a humanitarian response to commit to, and we were a province that wanted to be able to help as well. So now Nova Scotia has welcomed 134 new asylum seekers at this point in time, but we're always going to be ready. We're going to continue to monitor the situation, working closely with the federal government to make sure that these individuals who are now here in the province have the supports and resources they need to thrive. We also know that they're fleeing unimaginable circumstances. So to be able to provide a safe place for them to land, to start their new life, that's our commitment. And that's what we've been doing as a province time and time again. So again, knowing, and I'm so proud of Nova Scotians and our settlement partners in being able to be a part of those individuals' new success stories and making sure that they do have everything that they need to call Nova Scotia home. So again, Minister, we're proud to be with you and standing with you and being here in Halifax today and standing in this beautiful venue of Pier 21. We're reminded of the challenges that when someone has to leave their home, what they can, have to face. So providing that safe place for them is exactly what we need to do.
Excellent. Look, just if I could conclude, the pressure the communities have been facing along the Canada-US border, and particularly in Quebec, is serious. And it really does demand that we treat this like a national priority. When I say national, that does not mean just the federal government, but communities from one coast to the other. C'est très important pour continuer notre effort et notre travail de soutenir des personnes qui arrivent et qui fuient les persécutions, les guerres, les violences. This is something that makes me incredibly proud to be Atlantic Canadian. And I think the voices that you've heard on display this afternoon demonstrate that Atlantic Canada remains one of the most welcoming corners of the world. We're going to continue to do our part to contribute a national solution to a national challenge. If you give us just a few moments, we'll return to give you, with some of our colleagues from across the country, to give you a bit of a summary on the day. So just be patient with us for about 2 minutes and we'll be right back. Thank you. So look, maybe to conclude, folks, the reason that we gathered here today was for the Forum for Ministers responsible for immigration right across Canada. From my perspective, this was an extraordinary venue to host this particular conversation. For those of you who are tuning in, we're gathered here at Pier 21, which obviously has a long and storied history in welcoming newcomers to this country. People who showed up with very little other than the clothes on their backs have kickstarted generations of Canadians. And to be surrounded by the history in this National Museum on Immigration is certainly was a nice frame for the day. I want to take this opportunity to say a sincere thank you to my colleague, Minister Arlene Dunn, who over the past year has served as the co-chair alongside myself for the Forum for Ministers responsible for immigration. To have two Atlantic Canadians helping lead conversations around the path forward for Canada's system of immigration is something that I don't think would have been possible even just a few years ago. But to see the way that the Atlantic region has embraced immigration and the way that it's been reflected in Minister Dunn's leadership demonstrates to me that Atlantic Canada is going to continue to play a key role when it comes to developing the immigration system the entire country needs in the future. I want to say as well, thank you and congratulations to Minister Jeremy Harrison as the representative from Saskatchewan, who will be serving in the capacity as co-chair for the following year as we move forward with the forum. From my perspective, folks, it's very clear that Canada needs to continue to welcome newcomers in large numbers. We need to do so for economic reasons. We need to do so for demographic reasons. The economic recovery that we've experienced in Canada has been as strong as any advanced economy in the world. But at the same time, we have to recognize that despite an extraordinary jobs recovery and despite the fact that we're living through the lowest period of unemployment in recorded history in this country, we still have a labor shortage and long-term skills gaps in key sectors, including healthcare and home building in particular, that are going to demand that we continue to welcome newcomers for our economic well-being in the future. We also need to do so for demographic reasons. 50 years ago, there was 7 workers for every retired person in this country. Today, that number is closer to 3. In our region, in Atlantic Canada, that number is closer to 2. If we want to have conversations about a healthy economy a generation from now, we're going to depend upon the contribution of Canadians and newcomers alike for our economic and social well-being. 30 years from now, I hope to be having conversations about labor shortages and not the closure of schools and hospitals, because we'll have succeeded in our mission to continue to welcome newcomers that will help grow our economy. Today's conversation was incredibly productive, and I have to say how lucky I am to serve as Canada's Minister of Immigration because of the privilege that comes with being Canadian on this file. One of the biggest challenges we have is that we may not be able to welcome newcomers quickly enough to satisfy the demands of communities. The reality is that countries around the world have suffered from challenges when it comes to the divisive nature of their political debates around the issue of immigration. I can tell you, regardless of party, regardless of jurisdiction, regardless of level of government in this room today, unanimous support for continued high levels of immigration to help support growth in our communities. Now, there are challenges, and we've discussed those today as well. Challenges around the absorptive capacity of communities when it comes to ensuring that we continue to build out enough housing to support the people who are coming to our communities, that we continue to invest in healthcare systems and use our immigration system to attract the professionals we need to expand the capacity of our housing and healthcare sectors, rather than concern ourselves exclusively with the potential pressures that welcoming large numbers of newcomers will have on those particular sectors. Today's conversation involved many discussions about continuing to strengthen the provincial nominee program. I was pleased to share, as everyone was well aware when we landed here today, that there was a 44% increase in the provincial nominee program and continued significant increases in the rural and northern immigration pilot, and of course the Atlantic immigration program as well. We talked about ways that we can improve the economic immigration system, including in part by moving towards a category-based selection tool while respecting the need of provinces to be able to operate in a complementary way to whatever federal streams may exist, rather than having contradictory or duplicative processes. We continued to talk about how we can strengthen the settlement services across this Canada by making investments that will continue to expand funding opportunities as we expand our expectation of settlement service organizations with increased immigration ambition. And of course, we want to continue to address the humanitarian needs of some of the most vulnerable people in the world by supporting those who've landed in Canada from Ukraine, continuing to do right by Afghans who fled the war, and as you've heard a moment ago, some discussion as well about the need to continue to do right by those who are seeking asylum in this country. We also had a robust discussion on the issue of foreign credential recognition to ensure that those people who are coming to Canada have an opportunity to make a full contribution and practice their chosen profession at their full potential. Just to conclude, I want to express my gratitude once again to my colleagues. To be concerned about the need to support people rather than be concerned about whether they belong here in the first place, is a very positive Canadian attitude towards newcomers that I'm extremely grateful for. And once again, I just want to say thank you and congratulations to my co-chair, Minister Dunn, for exemplary service in this role. I think your work in this forum has advanced the well-being of newcomers in Canada and advanced our capacity at a federal and provincial level to make a difference for in the lives of those who arrive, and importantly, to foster an opportunity for them to make an important contribution to Canada for the rest of their lives. Thank you so much, Minister Dunn. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Minister Fraser, for those very kind remarks. I certainly appreciate it. So we actually did have a very productive forum. In my capacity as a Minister of Aboriginal Affairs, Immigration, Economic Development, Small Business and Opportunities, New Brunswick, these discussions are vital in terms of our province's values and also in terms of moving our province forward with respect to increasing our population and making sure that we're growing our population to be ready for the future. So we did actually have a very productive meeting over the course of today, and I'm very happy that we've actually built upon the stuff that we talked about back in July at the previous meeting that we had in St. John, New Brunswick. So we did discuss the need for timely and meaningful federal and provincial and territorial collaboration to allow for more flexibility, as well as autonomy in the provincial and the territorial nominee program, the PNP. And we acknowledge the importance of greater provincial and territorial influence over economic immigration selection. Province and territories are best positioned to select economic immigrants based upon specific labor market needs and to increase immigration to our regional and our smaller communities. Today, immigration ministers from across the country gathered to build on the momentum of our last meeting, as I said previously. This was an opportunity to further clarify the roles and the responsibilities of our respective governments, to reflect on our progress and to discuss the next steps that we must take to achieve our mutual immigration objectives. Partnership, collaboration, and a shared vision for enhancing Canada's immigration policies and programs are at the center of how federal, provincial, and territorial governments navigate the ever-changing immigration landscape. These discussions are important as we look to successfully attract, integrate, as well as retain immigrants. The PNP remains our primary immigration tool for meeting our economic and our labor market needs. That is why it is important to have a higher proportion of PNP admissions in the economic class that results in increased allocations for our provinces as well as territories. This will also help to reduce a PNP backlog and improve processing times so that we can better serve our clients as well as meet our economic needs. While these increased PNP allocations will help us grow our population base, we recognize that accessible, affordable, and appropriate housing is an emerging challenge that must be addressed. To reduce duplication and create better efficiencies within our immigration system, we must expedite the processing times for permanent residency or work permit applications received in connection with a valid nomination certificate. We know that service providers and settlement agencies are overextended, especially as we see record numbers of newcomers arriving and new initiatives for immigration being announced. Through this forum, we continue to discuss how we can work together to improve access to settlement supports for temporary residents on a pathway to permanent residency. Over the last year, we have seen many successes. Thanks to our hard work, we have endorsed our first ever multi-year PNP and AIP allocations. This will lead to even more innovation, flexibility, and predictability related to immigration planning to meet the needs of all of our respective governments. We have seen an improvement in processing times as well. We are looking at enhancing federal, provincial, territorial collaboration on foreign credential recognition, including with the Forum of Labor Market Ministers, to ensure individuals who are selected because of their work experience in a regulated occupation can work in their intended field. Our collaboration with employers, municipalities, service provider organizations, settlement agencies, and chambers of commerce is at an all-time high, allowing us to create an environment where immigrants can succeed. Over the last 6 months, we have worked diligently to identify ways to reduce duplication and increase provinces and territorial involvement in the immigration selection process. And we are continuously working to modernize all aspects of the economic immigration system. It is important to mention as well that as a forum, we have been welcoming and supporting displaced Ukrainians and their family members who are fleeing war. Through the preliminary results of IRCC's Ukraine Rapid Impact Evaluation, we will be able to consider lessons learned and also improve on processes as well as supports. These results will inform how we respond to a global crisis such as this in the future. We are also ready to do our part to respond to the influx of asylum seekers crossing the U.S. into Quebec. As previously mentioned, New Brunswick has welcomed groups of asylum claimants into communities, and we are working with IRCC, other government departments, stakeholders, and community groups to provide the supports that they need. I want to specifically thank those volunteers and community members that step up to help those arriving in the province, including hosts and billet families who welcome these newcomers with open arms. This reflects the welcoming nature of New Brunswickers and all Canadians, especially in circumstances like these when it's needed the very most. Immigrants and other newcomers help build stronger, more diverse, and vibrant communities. They're also much needed and appreciated sources of labor supply for employers in Canada. Without them, sectors like agriculture, silviculture, aquaculture, and construction would have a very difficult time succeeding. We appreciate their contributions to our communities and our economy. They make us better people. We are dedicated to improving the experience of all immigration candidates and employers throughout their immigration journey. We must ensure newcomers, immigrants, and asylum seekers have the proper supports to fully participate and succeed in a welcoming Canadian society. In closing, I would like to say how grateful I am for the discussions that we've had and for the opportunity to co-chair one last in-person meeting before New Brunswick transitions its seat to Saskatchewan at the end of this month. I wish all the best to my successor, Minister Harrison. Thank you as well to my co-chair, Minister Fraser. I had a number of discussions with some of my colleagues across the country today about Minister Fraser and his impact on immigration. And we all agreed that you have to have a heart to really care about immigrants and newcomers. You have to have a passion for this file. And we see that in you, Minister Fraser. Thank you. I look forward to continuing this work, and I certainly look forward to working with all my colleagues across the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci. I'm Natalie Poirier, Communications Advisor with Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, conseillère en communication avec Immigration, Réfugiés et Citoyenneté Canada. We will now proceed with the question and answer period from the media. We will alternate between questions from the floor here in the room as well as on Zoom. I have Alicia Bartlett from the Government of New Brunswick helping me moderate on Zoom. And I will now ask the reporters here to go to the microphone to ask their questions one by one. We will have the time for one question and one follow-up question per reporter. And prior to asking your questions, please give me your name and the media you're representing en français maintenant. Donc, nous allons maintenant procéder avec la séance de questions et réponses des médias. Nous allons alterner entre les questions des journalistes sur place et ceux sur Zoom. Alicia Bartlett du gouvernement du Nouveau-Brunswick va m'aider avec les participants sur Zoom. Je demanderai maintenant aux journalistes dans la salle de se diriger vers le micro et poser vos questions. Nous aurons le temps pour une question et une sous-question par journaliste. Et avant de poser votre question, veuillez donner votre nom et le média que vous représentez. Nous allons maintenant commencer ici dans la salle. Are there any questions here on the floor? Yes. Please state your name and media. Votre nom et média.
Hi, Minister. Thanks for taking our questions. Kristen Ashkate with CTV National News. My first question is, how can the federal government keep track of everyone coming across the border if they aren't issuing the proper documents? We spoke to aid groups who work with asylum seekers, and they told us the problem is that there are delays with the federal government's issuing documents like work permits.
Look, thanks very much. There's a number of different ways that we monitor and keep track of people who've come into the country. Every person who crosses at Roxham Road, for example, it immediately is dealt with by the RCMP, who starts a file, and those who will often very shortly afterward receive what's called a brown paper to help them access certain services. And I would point out, though, there's been some commentary I've seen publicly about not everyone receiving one, largely due to the fact that it's been shared in an electronic way, and people are still catching up to how they're supposed to access those documents, which is something we're working on to share good information about. With respect to the issue around work permits, historically there has been a challenge, but we've been able to overcome this challenge. The processing times were taking a significant period of time, often because we've initially required people to complete their medical examination or an interview before they had an opportunity to access a work permit. Due to a shift in policy and the adoption of digital solutions to process them more quickly, 80% of people after their health appointment are receiving a work permit within 6 days. This has been a significant change. We do still have some work to do to catch up for people who have submitted an application sometime before, but going forward, this problem has been solved, and we look forward to continuing to process what other cases may be in the inventory, so people are able to support themselves while they're here awaiting adjudication of their asylum claim.
Thank you, Minister. And my follow-up is, how much extra strain are these asylum seekers putting on an already backlogged system? And how are you going to address this issue? And will there be any new funding for the provinces for this?
So when it comes to asylum seekers, there's different aspects to your question. So indulge me for 20 seconds and I'll try to distinguish. When it comes to processing for temporary residency or permanent residency, this is a separate stream of people who've come into Canada. And the timelines are not impacted for visitors' visas or permanent residency. Of course, because they are applying for work permits, there are some pressures on processing that could result. But with the adoption of the digital solution that I've just discussed a moment ago, I'm confident that this is not going to have a severe or negative impact on our ability to catch up on a backlog that's been diminishing. Just so you have full information, over the course of the past few months since this summer, there's been more than 600,000 fewer cases in the system today compared to this summer. We've seen that the service standard for new applicants has returned under our federal express entry system, our family reunification system. Work permits and study permits are very close to being back to the pre-pandemic service standard. There is some work left to do on visitors' visas, but as I mentioned, that's a different subject compared to processing. The bigger pressures that we're seeing are a result of the fact that significant numbers of people have arrived in individual communities in large numbers. The federal government has programs to help cover the cost on an interim basis of health and housing for people while they sort out more permanent accommodations and before they transition to a work permit, which may entitle them, depending on the province they're in, to other social services as they continue to work and pay taxes. The opportunity to benefit from services will change over time. But the reality is that this is a social fact that we need to deal with in a responsible way. The reality is that there are people here that need to be treated with empathy and with respect as we adjudicate their asylum claims. We're going to continue to treat people with that respect and work very closely with municipal governments that are graciously hosting significant numbers of newcomers, as well as with provincial governments, to see how we can best coordinate the services that each level of government is prepared and able to provide. There are no simple solutions, but as we continue to see people arrive, we're going to do our best to treat them with empathy and respect.
All right, we will now go to questions on Zoom. On va procéder à une question sur Zoom.
Okay, first we're going to go to the Toronto Star, Nicholas King.
Hi, Minister. Thank you so much for answering our questions. I have a couple quick questions. One is, what's the capacity of the Atlantic provinces in terms of like how many asylum seekers who cross irregularly can the 4 provinces actually take on? Because relatively, there are not as much settlement services available. They may not have the kind of capacity or structure to serve the newcomers. So that's my first question, whether you have any projection, how many asylum seekers the 4 Atlantic provinces could take on. My second question is, in terms of like what sort of response you receive from the other provinces who may have, larger capacity to take on the irregular migrants arriving. Thank you.
Excellent. So thank you very much. And look, I don't want to be trying to evade the first question, but it's because there's not an official answer to what the ceiling for settlement capacity in Atlantic Canada is. Of course, when we're dealing with settlement capacity, it involves not just those who are seeking asylum, but more broadly, the total number of people who are moving into Atlantic Canada. Our settlement sector capacity has grown enormously in the Atlantic region over the past number of years. You'll actually see that the fastest growing cities in all of Canada last year were Moncton and Halifax, which would surprise a lot of people who come from larger urban centres. What we've seen is at a community level, in addition to the formal settlement services that have historically been operating in this region, communities have developed the capacity to more successfully welcome and integrate newcomers, particularly following the effort to welcome Syrian refugees. So I hesitate to put a projected ceiling on what Atlantic Canada is capable of because they've so routinely exceeded my own expectations having grown up here my entire life. I expect that we will respond in accordance with the need that we see, and we'll do our best to make sure that no one particular community is seeing more people arrive than they can adequately handle. With respect to the questions that you asked regarding other provinces, let me first say a thank you to the province of Ontario for their work. In particular, there's a number of communities. I hesitate to start naming them because I may leave one out, but in particular, I'm thinking of Cornwall, of Windsor, of Niagara, of Ottawa, a number of other communities as well that have really stepped up out of necessity. They have seen, because they have the capacity with space to keep a roof over people's heads, that they have seen large numbers of people arrive, and we're going to continue to work closely with them. But there will be, I expect, additional communities step forward when they come to understand not just the responsibility to deal with individuals seeking asylum, but the opportunity as we continue to grow the skills inventory for people to contribute solutions to the labor shortage that we've been experiencing across the country. I've not had a negative conversation with any of my provincial counterparts. There are other provinces that we're still having conversations with who may choose to take part in an initiative, but we want to work in partnership with them to ensure that they're able to adequately prepare for people who may arrive in their communities. Again, there's no simple solution, but my view is that we need to work closely with our partners at the provincial and municipal level to ensure we're doing everything we can to prepare people and successfully integrate those newcomers who may arrive in our communities who are fleeing vulnerable circumstances. And look, Nick, I don't mean to put my colleagues on the spot. You do have some of my Atlantic Canadian counterparts who are standing next to me if you're interested in their perspective. I think you guys are getting off the hook.
Yeah.
We'll now take a question for the floor. On va prendre une question sur les lieux.
Hi, Sarah Plowman with CTV News Atlantic. I was speaking with the Halifax Refugee Clinic today, and they told me that the number of asylum seekers they're helping is unprecedented, and they're happy to help, but they do need help from you, specifically around legal aid to help process their claims. So are you, as the federal government, prepared to provide more money to organizations such as this one for that purpose? And if so, how much?
Look, I don't have an announcement to make today about new funding for refugee legal aid, but I can tell you it's an issue that I've been watching for the last number of years. In fact, before I held this particular position. The reality is when it comes to legal aid more generally, it's a shared federal and provincial responsibility. And of course, given the federal involvement with welcoming refugees, I think we have a moral obligation to continue to fund legal aid services for people who often have language barriers, who often may not understand a complicated process and the paperwork that may be required. So if we want to have people offer them procedural fairness, giving them access to counsel is something that I think is very important. I have had the opportunity to engage with my colleague, the Minister of Justice, David Lametti, on this particular issue. We're going to keep working with practitioners to develop a program that will allow us to adequately fund refugee legal aid. But as I mentioned, I don't have full details on what next steps may look like, and I'd rather take that step in collaboration with the service providers alongside my ministerial colleagues who are responsible for the file. So don't have all of the details for you on next steps today, but it's a challenging situation that I recognize needs additional support, and I'm working towards to help provide that support.
Okay. And for Minister from New Brunswick as well as Nova Scotia, I think people would like to know what you would like to see more from the federal government to help meet the needs of services and help accommodate asylum seekers who we're now welcoming into our provinces at a much higher rate than previous.
Thank you for the question. And I think, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we have the capacity to welcome them, not just to welcome them, but support them with respect to what their needs are moving forward. So ideally, I think this partnership that we have with the federal government in terms of the immigration file and all the things that we're working on collectively, I do have the impression and the understanding that they significantly understand the situation that we're in with respect to welcoming these asylum seekers and newcomers in general. I think that we all talked about this today, the settlement services and the fact that they are overextended, and we understand that. So we're working with all the settlement servicing agencies right across our province, and we're staying in tune with them. So I can tell you on behalf of the province of New Brunswick, when we had the asylum seekers come to Fredericton was the initial stop, we actually worked with the Multicultural Association of Fredericton, who were there standing up and saying, look, how can we help? So they were there to greet them. They were there at the hotel to speak with them and to try to figure out how could we help best. So I would say moving forward, there would be an expectation. We'd like to see more settlement support services. We understand that not just the province of New Brunswick, but every province is strapped right now because we are doing so well with respect to immigration. So this is going to be a file that we continue to work on and collaborate with the federal government. But I do feel confident in saying that we have a very good partner there that's listening to us and listening to our concerns and will work through us with these particular issues.
Thank you. We're now going to go to a question on Zoom. On va maintenant aller avec une question sur Zoom.
Pascal Vachon, TFO.
Yeah, hi. My question for Minister Fraser. I know your French got really good in the past few months, but I'm going to ask my question in English.
Look, we've got a serious problem with the audio, and I promise it's not the quality of my French that's causing me not to understand.
Having heard a figure from your colleagues today that the majority of asylum seekers are outside of Quebec. Be better now.
Sorry, I'm unable to hear the audio. Is there something that we can do in the room?
Maybe he could type the question. Est-ce que vous pourriez taper la question? Or we can go to the next question and we'll come back to Monsieur Pascal, to Monsieur Vachon. In the room. Okay. Next question in the room. Prochaine question dans la salle et on retournera à Monsieur Vachon pour après.
Hi, Kira Morellen with Radio Canada. I'm just going to take a step back for a moment from the asylum seekers, which are obviously an important issue right now. But, you know, what can you tell to maybe francophone immigrants that might be worried that this might slow their case down when they're coming either for permanent resident or applying for citizenship, which I know are different processes. So do they have a reason to worry or not?
Non, en français?
Ah, ce serait parfait.
OK, merci. En fait, la situation est très différente et j'ai bonne nouvelle. L'année passée est la première fois le gouvernement fédéral atteindre la cible de 4,4% de le total de nouveaux arrivants au Canada et francophones. C'est important parce que le but est pour obtenir la cible cette année, 2023, un an en avance. C'est très important. C'est essentiel de protéger les poids démographiques des francophones au Canada. Si vous avez l'ambition de continuer d'augmenter le niveau d'immigration en général, c'est essentiel aussi pour augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants francophones. Alors maintenant, j'ai beaucoup d'espoir parce que les communautés en situation, la communauté francophone en situation minoritaire a beaucoup de succès. Et quand j'ai vu le nombre, je crois que c'est possible pour continuer de augmenter le poids démographique de francophones. La situation au Québec est différente parce que le gouvernement de Québec a le pouvoir sur l'accord de Canada-Québec de choisir chaque nouveau personne économique et le temps pour traiter les cas dépend n'est pas sur la capacité du gouvernement fédéral, mais aussi sur le niveau au Québec et le nombre d'applications. Quand le nombre des applications est plus grand comme le niveau, c'est difficile pour traiter chaque cas dans une année. Mais c'est incroyable dans la région atlantique dans l'année passée. Il y a plus de 3000 personnes qui arrivaient à cette région dans l'année passée. Juste pour les perspectives, en 2014, il y a moins de personnes hors Québec, partout notre pays, qui arrivaient au Canada, comme le nombre juste dans la région atlantique l'année passée. The reality is that I don't see an impact on the processing times for francophone newcomers when it comes to having additional people cross the border in an irregular way. There's a whole host of reasons why we need to continue to address the situation at the border, but we can certainly continue to process francophone newcomers' applications in a timely way. And I don't say that out of a sense of hopeless optimism. I say it because it's been proven by the numbers with us at achieving the goal 1 year in advance last year that has never been achieved despite 20 years of effort.
And do you expect to still attract more francophone immigrants to Canada? I know we have a target. It's been reached, like you said. Do you expect that to keep on happening?
Absolument. C'est une certainté. Ce n'est pas OK pour moi de continuer d'augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants dans le plan annuel. Si nous devons un plan pour augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants francophones. Notre pays est un pays avec 2 langues officielles. Alors, si vous voulez de continuer d'être un pays bilingue, c'est essentiel pour accueillir des personnes avec les compétences linguistiques en les français et en anglais. C'est très important. C'est une part de notre identité culturelle au Canada et c'est très important. C'est une priorité pour moi. C'est une priorité pour le gouvernement fédéral.
Merci beaucoup. On va maintenant retourner à Monsieur Vachon sur Zoom. We're not going to go to Monsieur Vachon.
All right. I hope you hear me better now. So for you, Mr. Fraser, I see, having heard the figure from your colleagues today, that the majority of asylum seekers from Roxham Road who are directed outside of Quebec go to Ontario. So are you still going to send the majority of them to Ontario? And you talked earlier in your other response about maybe sending them to other communities except from the previous one, like Cornwall and Niagara Falls. So I'm wondering, is there any discussion with other cities in particular, for example, the Greater Toronto area, for maybe for getting those for finding a home, or I could say for those asylum seekers from Roxham Road?
So yes, and the communities I've named do not represent an exhaustive list of the communities where asylum seekers are currently located. Of course, there's still a significant number in Quebec. There are more who've arrived in communities across Ontario, and I expect the numbers in other regions will continue to increase as we identify communities that have the capacity to make sure that people will not be living without a roof over their heads when they find themselves in Canada. We're going to continue to seek to identify additional communities to ensure that we don't disproportionately have one community or another feel the impact when I've described this moments ago as a national issue that requires national solutions. So we're going to continue to work with communities to identify those who may have housing capacity, those who have employers that are looking for workers to fill key jobs in their economy, those who have capacity in the settlement services sector. This is going to be a continued exercise, and even when we find a solution through our partnership with the United States, there will still be people who make asylum claims in this country. There will still be a need for communities to treat people with empathy, with dignity, and with respect, and we're going to continue to work to identify communities who have the capacity to treat people fairly while they await the adjudication of their claim. So to answer your question, yes, we will identify additional communities. I have not given you an exhaustive list quite yet, but I expect the communities that are already, the list of communities that are hosting people will grow beyond those who already have asylum seekers in their community today.
Thank you. Merci. Because we skipped Zoom,
C'est OK.
we are going to return to Zoom. On va retourner à Zoom à la prochaine question.
We're going to go to Anna Mailer-Paperney from Reuters.
And this will probably be our last question. Ceci sera peut-être une dernière question.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much. What are you hearing from your U.S. counterpart when it comes to rewriting the Safe Third Country Agreement to sort of apply to the border? And why do you think they'd agree to do that?
Sorry, could you just repeat the last part of your question?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Why do you think they would agree to that?
First of all, the relationship that we have with the United States is as strong as the relationship that Canada has with any other country in the world. They have been an excellent partner on this issue, amongst others, to continue to have conversations regarding the mutual concern around managing the border in an organized way. Of course, border management and irregular migration is an issue the United States is extremely familiar with. The scale, obviously, at their southwest border is much, much greater than at the northern border. More recently, you've certainly seen additional coverage around stories of people who might be crossing from not just the United States to Canada, but Canada to the US. But to be clear, my sense is they are motivated because they want to be a good partner to Canada, who is as strong as an ally as the United States could hope to have. My conversation with the Secretary of Homeland Security was extremely productive. It touched on the Safe Third Country Agreement, but having the orderly operation of our border more broadly, and also a significant focus on addressing the root cause of irregular migration and establishing regular pathways for people who are thinking about leaving their country of origin. As I mentioned before, there's no simple solutions, but part of the solution is going to involve a continued partnership with the United States, who responded in the best way that I hoped they could by continuing to engage with us and in search of solutions to the shared challenge and shared priority of the orderly management of our shared border.
Thank you. Did the issue of bus tickets to Plattsburgh paid for by New York City come up at all in your talks?
That's not something that I engaged directly with on my American counterpart. The news coverage that we've likely all seen on that was from a few weeks ago. Wasn't the topic of our conversation. Instead, we were seeking to identify solutions to the challenge that we're seeing with irregular migration, rather than rehashing some of the stories that we've seen in the news in recent weeks. Having a solution-oriented partner is what I hoped upon my departure for Washington, and certainly felt that we were treated with respect, and I found it was a very useful way to spend my time, and we were focused more on forward-looking solutions than news stories we may have seen over the past few weeks.
Thank you. We're now finished with the question period.
Okay, and I will need to leave quickly. I see there's someone here. Is it possible to grab something on the way out? Okay. Thank you so much. Merci tout le monde. C'était un plaisir, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.